Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last cargo container into his ship. The Star Runner was an old freight vessel, but it was his, and he had spent years making it reliable. The ship might not look like much from the outside, but Jake had modified almost every system to make it faster and more efficient than other cargo haulers. The spaceport on Titan Station buzzed with activity. Merchants shouted about their goods, maintenance crews worked on various ships, and travelers hurried past with their luggage. Jake had been coming to this station for 3 years now, and he knew most of the regular faces. Today felt different, though. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Jake had learned to trust his instincts during his 5 years in the human colonial defense force. Those instincts had kept him alive during the border conflicts with the Razor Pirates. Now, as an independent cargo hauler, those same instincts helped him avoid trouble in the rougher parts of the galaxy. He walked around his ship one more time, checking the external systems. Everything looked normal. The cargo was secure, the fuel tanks were full, and his navigation computer showed a clear route to his next destination. Still, something felt wrong. "You heading out soon, Jake?" called out Pete Collins, another cargo hauler who worked the same routes. Pete's ship was docked 3 berths over, and the 2 men had become friends over the past year. "Yeah, leaving in about an hour," Jake replied. "You notice anything strange around here lately?" Pete scratched his gray beard and looked around the busy docking bay. "Strange how? This place is always crazy." "I don't know. It just feels like someone's been asking too many questions about my ship and my routes." "Maybe you're just being careful. Nothing wrong with that in this business." Pete shrugged. "Safe travels, Jake. See you at Kepler Station next month." Jake nodded and climbed aboard his ship, sealed the airlock, and made his way to the bridge. The Star Runner's interior was cramped but comfortable. Jake had arranged everything exactly how he liked it. His pilot seat was worn but supportive, and all the controls were within easy reach. As he ran through his pre-flight checklist, Jake thought about the past few weeks. There had been small incidents at several different stations. His ship's computer had mysteriously reset twice. Fuel pump had broken down just as he was about to refuel, causing a delay. Someone had asked the dockmaster about his shipping records at the last 3 ports. Any one of these incidents could be explained as bad luck or routine problems. Together, they formed a pattern that made Jake uncomfortable. Someone was interested in his movements, and they were being careful about it. Jake started the Star Runner's engines and requested departure clearance from station control. Within minutes, he was clear of the station and heading into open space. He set course for the Meridian system, where he would deliver mining equipment to a new colony. The first day of travel passed without incident. Jake caught up on his reading, performed routine maintenance on his ship's systems, and prepared his evening meal. He tried to convince himself that his worries were just paranoia, but he couldn't relax completely. On the second day, Jake decided to test his suspicions. Instead of following his planned route directly, he made a detour to a small trading post called Haven Point. The detour would add 6 hours to his journey, but it would also reveal if anyone was following him. Haven Point was little more than a fuel station and a few shops built around an old asteroid mining platform. Jake docked and went inside to buy supplies he didn't really need. While he shopped, he watched for anyone who seemed out of place or overly interested in him. The trading post was nearly empty. An elderly woman ran the general store, and a few miners sat in the small cantina drinking and playing cards. Jake bought some coffee and ration packs, then returned to his ship. As he prepared to leave, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Someone had been inside his ship. The evidence was subtle, but clear to someone who knew what to look for. A coffee cup had been moved slightly on his small table. One of his navigation charts was folded differently than he remembered. Most telling of all, the magnetic seal on his personal locker showed signs of being opened and resealed. Jake's hands shook slightly as he checked his ship's security logs. According to the computer, no one had entered the ship while he was gone. Someone had disabled his security system without leaving any trace in the electronic records. That level of skill suggested his stalker was a professional. Jake immediately began a thorough search of his ship. He found 3 small devices hidden in different locations. The devices were unlike anything he had seen before. They were about the size of coins and seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and changed color as he examined them, using a pair of insulated tools. Jake carefully removed the devices and placed them in a shielded container. He had no idea what they were designed to do, but he didn't want them active on his ship. The technology was clearly alien and far more advanced than anything humans normally encountered. For the first time since the strange incidents began, felt real fear. Someone with access to advanced alien technology was tracking him. This wasn't a simple case of pirates or criminals interested in his cargo. This was something much more serious. Jake changed course again, this time heading for the Outer Rim. Territories where he could lose himself among the countless small settlements and hidden bases. He needed time to think and plan. More importantly, he needed to figure out who was hunting him and why, as the Star Runner jumped to faster-than-light travel. Jake didn't notice the small scout ship that followed at a distance. The ship's pilot was pleased with how icily the human had revealed his awareness of being hunted. The tracking devices had served their purpose even after being discovered. Zexlia adjusted her ship's controls with movements that were both precise and graceful. Her reptilian features remained expressionless, but inside she felt the familiar excitement of a hunt entering its next phase. For 3 months, she had been studying this human, learning his patterns and capabilities. The human, called Jake Morrison, was more observant than most of her previous targets, but he was still just a primitive cargo hauler. His little tricks with changing course and searching his ship showed some basic tactical thinking, but nothing that would challenge a true hunter. Zexlia species, the Vorthok, had been hunting across the galaxy for thousands of years before humans had even developed space travel. She had personally captured representatives of 47 different species, and humans were among the youngest and least developed races she had encountered. The Galactic Trade Consortium had hired her to bring Jake Morrison back alive. According to her employers, he had stolen navigation data from a restricted system and needed to face justice. The job paid well, and it gave Zexlia an opportunity to add another species to her collection of successful hunts. She had spent weeks ecology and behavior. Humans were pack animals who relied on tools and cooperation. To overcome their physical limitations, they were clever in their own primitive way. But they lacked the refined hunting instincts that evolution had given to superior species, like the Vorthok. Zexlia could have captured Jake Morrison at any time during the past 3 months. She had been close enough to touch him on 17 different occasions, but where was the honor in a simple capture? A true hunt required the prey to know it was being hunted. The fear and desperation that followed made the eventual capture all the more satisfying. Now the real hunt could begin. 3 weeks had passed since Jake discovered the alien tracking devices on his ship. He had changed his route 4 times, visited ports he had never been to before, and even spent 2 days hiding in an asteroid field. Despite all his efforts, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still following him. Jake sat in the pilot's chair of the Star Runner, staring at a star map displayed on his main screen. He had been studying shipping routes and looking for patterns in his own travel history. If someone was tracking him, they had to be getting information from somewhere. Either they had planted more devices he hadn't found, or they were getting help from people at the various ports and stations he visited. The thought that someone might be watching him from inside the places he considered safe made Jake's stomach turn. He had friends at dozens of different locations across the galaxy. The idea that one of them might be feeding information to his stalker felt like a betrayal. Jake's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The sender was Lisa Grant, his occasional co-pilot and one of his closest friends. Lisa worked as an independent navigator and sometimes joined Jake on longer cargo runs when he needed an extra pair of hands. "Jake, you look terrible," Lisa said when her image appeared on the screen. She had short brown hair and kind eyes that always seemed to be smiling. Today, those eyes showed concern. "When was the last time you got a decent night's sleep?" "Been having some trouble with my ship's systems," Jake lied. He didn't want to worry Lisa or drag her into whatever danger was following him. "Nothing serious, just keeping me busy." You know I can tell when you're lying, right? Lisa crossed. Her arms had gave him the same look she used when she caught him trying to skip meals. What's really going on? Jake considered telling her the truth. Lisa was smart and resourceful, and she had military experience like he did. But involving her would put her at risk. And Jake couldn't live with himself if something happened to her because of his problems. Just some business complications, Jake said. I'll work it out. Lisa didn't look convinced, but she didn't push the issue. Well, if you need help with anything, you know where to find me. I'm working the Centauri run for the next few weeks.
After
Ending the call, Jake returned to studying his star map. He had marked every port and station he had visited in the past 4 months. Looking at the pattern, he realized that his stalker would have needed incredible resources to maintain surveillance across so many different locations. That thought led to another disturbing realization. The tracking devices he had found were made with technology far beyond what most criminal organizations could access. Whoever was hunting him had serious backing, possibly from one of the major galactic powers. Jake's computer chimed with an alert. A ship had just entered the system and was approaching his position. Jake quickly powered up his engines and prepared to run. But the approaching ship broadcast a standard merchant identification code. It was a supply vessel heading for the mining colony on the system's 3rd planet. Jake forced himself to relax. But the incident reminded him how paranoid he was becoming. Every ship, every stranger, every unexpected sound made him jump. This was no way to live, and it was affecting his ability to work. Over the next few days, Jake tried to establish a normal routine. He accepted a cargo delivery job that would take him through 3 different systems. The work would give him something to focus on besides his fears. The route would let him test whether his stalker was still active. The first system was called New Dallas, a frontier world where human colonists were trying to build farms in hostile terrain. Jake delivered agricultural equipment and picked up a load of rare minerals that the colonists had found in their fields. The work was routine, and Jake began to hope that maybe his problems were over. On his way to the second system, Jake's ship's sensors detected an anomaly. For just a moment, there seemed to be another ship nearby, but when Jake tried to get a better look, the readings disappeared. He ran a full diagnostic on his sensor array and found nothing wrong with the equipment. Jake's blood ran cold as he realized what had happened. Someone with advanced cloaking technology had been following him, and they had briefly made a mistake that allowed his sensors to detect them. His stalker was still out there, and they were using technology that made them nearly invisible. The second system was a busy trade hub called Meridian Station. Jake delivered his minerals and picked up manufactured goods bound for the frontier. While he was at the station, he tried an experiment. He visited the cantina and loudly discussed his plans to travel to the Vega system next. Then he returned to his ship and actually set course for the Ross system. If someone was listening to his conversations, they would be expecting him to go to Vega by going to Ross instead. Jake hoped to break free from their surveillance and gain some breathing room. The plan seemed to work. Jake completed his delivery at Ross Colony without incident and began to think he had finally lost his pursuer. He was wrong. On his way to the third system, Jake's ship received a priority message from Meridian Station Security. The message claimed that Jake had failed to pay his docking fees and needed to return immediately to settle the matter. Jake knew the message was fake because he always paid his fees in advance, but someone had gone to considerable trouble to create a believable official communication. Jake realized that his stalker was trying to control his movements. By creating fake emergencies and false obligations, they could force him to travel to specific locations where they could set up ambushes or observation posts. The level of planning and resources required for such operations was staggering. Jake decided to turn the tables. Instead of reacting to the fake message, he sent a reply claiming that he would return to Meridian Station in 3 days. Then he changed course and headed for a remote outpost called Frontier's End. If his stalker was monitoring his communications, they would be waiting at Meridian while Jake was actually hundreds of light years away. Frontier's End was little more than a refueling depot built around an old military listening post. The facility was run by a retired Navy officer named Captain Roy Williams, who didn't ask questions about his customers' business as long as they paid in advance. Jake docked at the station and told Captain Williams that he needed to perform maintenance on his ship. What he actually planned to do was set a trap for his stalker. Jake had been running from this threat for weeks, and he was tired of being prey. Jake spent 2 days modifying his ship's systems. He installed hidden cameras throughout the star runner and set up motion sensors that would detect even the slightest unauthorized entry. He also programmed his computer to send an emergency signal if anyone tried to access his ship's systems without his personal authorization code. On the 3rd day, Jake made a show of leaving the station for a few hours. He told Captain Williams that he needed to test his ship's engines in open space. What he actually did was position the Star Runner behind a nearby asteroid where he could observe the station without being seen. Jake didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after he had supposedly left, a ship appeared near Frontier's End. The vessel was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was sleek and organic looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. More importantly, it had appeared from nowhere, confirming that it was equipped with advanced cloaking technology. Jake watched through his telescope as a figure in form-fitting armor left the strange ship and entered the station. The figure moved with a fluid grace that suggested it was not human. After a few minutes, the figure emerged from the station and approached Jake's docked ship. Jake's hidden cameras activated as the intruder entered the Star Runner for the first time. Jake got a clear look at his stalker. The figure was roughly humanoid, but clearly alien. Skin had a scaled, reptilian appearance, and its movements were too quick and precise to be human. The alien's armor seemed to shift and change color as it moved, providing natural camouflage. The alien spent nearly an hour aboard Jake's ship, apparently studying every detail of the interior. It examined his personal belongings, checked his navigation logs, and even sampled his food supplies. The creature's behavior suggested it was learning about human habits and preferences. Jake watched in fascination and growing anger as the alien installed new tracking devices throughout his ship. These devices were even smaller and more sophisticated than the ones he had found weeks earlier. The alien placed them in locations that would be almost impossible to detect without tearing the ship apart. When the alien finally left, Jake waited another hour before returning to the station. He now knew who was hunting him and had some idea of their capabilities. The alien was clearly a professional tracker, and its technology was far superior to anything humans possessed. But Jake had also learned something important. The alien was overconfident. It had spent an hour aboard his ship without taking any serious precautions against detection. It apparently didn't consider Jake a real threat, which was a mistake Jake intended to exploit. Jake began planning his counterattack. He had been running long enough. It was time to become the hunter. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Kepler's Edge mining station, looking out at the swirling gas clouds of the nearby nebula. The station was small and isolated, exactly the kind of place where someone might try to settle their problems quietly. Jake had been expecting this moment for 2 weeks now, ever since he had started his careful preparations. He had spent those 2 weeks learning everything he could about his alien stalker. Jake had researched every species database he could access, looking for creatures that matched what he had seen on his hidden cameras. The search had taken him to some dark corners of the galactic information networks, but he had finally found what he was looking for. His stalker was a Vorthok, a species known throughout the galaxy as professional hunters. The Vorthok had been tracking and capturing other species for thousands of years, were faster than humans, stronger than humans, and equipped with natural abilities that made them nearly perfect predators. Their skin could change color for camouflage, their senses were incredibly sharp, and their reflexes were lightning fast. Jake had also learned that Vorthok hunters followed a strict code of honor. They preferred to capture their prey alive when possible, and they always gave their targets a chance to surrender before using deadly force. This knowledge had given Jake an idea for how to handle the coming confrontation. The mining station around him buzzed with quiet activity. Kepler's Edge was home to about 200 workers who spent their days extracting rare metals from the asteroid belt. The station's security was minimal. consisting of just a few guards who were more concerned with preventing accidents than dealing with outside threats. Jake had chosen this location carefully. The station's layout gave him several advantages, and its remote location meant that any confrontation would happen without innocent bystanders getting hurt. More importantly, Jake had spent the past week making modifications to the station's industrial systems. Jake's communication device chimed with a message from the station's docking control. A ship had just requested permission to dock, claiming to need emergency repairs. Jake smiled grimly. Stalker had finally decided to make her move. Jake made his way through the station's corridors toward the main docking bay. He had memorized every hallway, every maintenance access, and every emergency system on the station. If this confrontation was going to happen, Jake intended to control every aspect of it. The docking bay was dimly lit and filled with the usual clutter of a working space station. Cargo containers, maintenance equipment, and repair tools were scattered around the large chamber. Jake positioned himself near what appeared to be a standard control panel, but which he had secretly modified. Over the past week, Jake didn't have to wait long. The air in the docking bay seemed to shimmer, and suddenly, a figure materialized from thin air. The Vorthok hunter was exactly as Jake remembered from his cameras, but seeing the alien in person was still shocking. The creature was tall and graceful, with reptilian features and armor that seemed to flow like liquid across its body. Charge. And sometimes the way forward is into someone else's. Uncarped fide. Good opienta croth gauge theroms. With reptides contract at the ford. Sarum tyran 7 rexter. The subram said on 7 wade, at the whelps, that I said one sever. Ples plod. Though her voice had a strange musical quality that made it clear she was not human. My name is Zexlia. I am a hunter of the Vorthok, and you are my assigned prey. Jake forced himself to remain calm, even though every instinct was screaming at him to run. Well, that's direct. Can I ask what I'm supposed to have done to deserve the attention of a professional hunter? Zexlia tilted her head, apparently surprised by Jake's calm response. You have stolen navigation data from a restricted system. The Galactic Trade Consortium has hired me to bring you back to face justice. That's interesting, Jake said, genuinely curious. Which system are we talking about? I've been to a lot of places in the past year. The Omega Centauri Research Facility. You accessed their navigation computers and downloaded classified star charts. He had never heard of the Omega Centauri Research Facility, and he certainly had never stolen anything from them. Either Zexlia was lying, or someone had fed her false information. I think there's been a mistake, Jake said. I've never been to any research facility in the Omega Centauri region. You sure you have the right person? Zexlia's eyes narrowed. You denied the charges? Absolutely deny them. I'm a cargo hauler, not a data thief. Someone has given you wrong information. For the first time since the conversation began, Zexlia looked uncertain. Jake could see her processing this new information and trying to decide whether he was telling the truth. It does not matter, Zexlia said finally. I have been hired to capture Jake Morrison, and you are Jake Morrison. The truth of the charges is not my concern. But it should be, Jake replied. Think about it. If I didn't steal anything, then why would the Trade Consortium want me captured? And why would they hire someone like you for a simple cargo hauler? Could see that his words were having an effect. Zexlia was clearly intelligent, and she was beginning to realize that something about this job didn't make sense. You are trying to confuse me with words, Zexlia said, but she sounded less certain than before. This is a common tactic of prey species when cornered. Maybe, Jake admitted. But answer me this. In all your years of hunting, have you ever been hired to capture someone for stealing navigation data? That seems like a job for regular security forces, not a legendary Vorthok hunter. Zexlia was silent for a long moment. Jake could practically see her mind working, considering the implications of what he had said. Finally, she shook her head. Enough talk. You will surrender now, or I will be forced to subdue you. Jake sighed. He had hoped to resolve this peacefully. But it seemed that Zexlia was too committed to her mission to listen to reason. It was time to move to his backup plan. I'm sorry you feel that way, Jake said. I was hoping we could work this out like civilized beings. Zexlia moved toward him with fluid grace, her hand reaching for what appeared to be some kind of restraint device. She was fast, faster than any human could be. But Jake had been expecting this moment for weeks. Jake's hand slammed down on the modified control panel beside him. Instantly, the docking bay erupted into controlled chaos. The artificial gravity field shifted, creating pockets of low gravity and high gravity throughout the chamber. Magnetic containment fields activated, creating invisible barriers that could stop a moving person in their tracks. Industrial robotic arms began moving in patterns that Jake had programmed, carrying cargo containers and maintenance equipment in seemingly random directions. Zexlia found herself caught in the middle of a three-dimensional maze that changed every few seconds. Her superior reflexes and agility meant nothing when the environment itself was working against her. She tried to leap toward Jake, only to find herself caught in a low-gravity field that sent her floating toward the ceiling. When she tried to use her natural camouflage to hide, the moving robotic arms kept changing the shadows and sightlines. What is this? Zexlia demanded, her voice showing frustration for the first time. This is what humans do when we can't win with strength or speed, Jake replied, moving carefully through the chaos toward a control station he had prepared. We changed the rules of the game. Jake had spent years in the military learning how to turn any environment into a battlefield that favored him. The techniques that worked against human enemies worked even better against an alien who had never encountered such tactics. Zexlia tried to reach Jake again, but a magnetic field caught her armor and held her suspended in midair. She struggled against the invisible force, her movements becoming increasingly desperate. This is not honorable combat, Zexlia protested. You're right, Jake agreed as he reached his control station. This isn't combat at all. This is pest control. Jake activated the final part of his trap. Containment fields surrounded Zexlia, the same kind used to hold dangerous criminals on prison ships. The field was designed to adapt to whatever was trapped inside it, making escape nearly impossible. You cannot hold me forever, Zexlia said, though her voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. I don't need to hold you forever, Jake replied. I just need to hold you long enough to figure out who really hired you and why they want me dead. Jake walked over to examine Zexlia's equipment, which had been scattered when the gravity fields activated. Her weapons were unlike anything he had seen before, clearly built with technology far beyond human capabilities. More interesting were her communication devices, which might contain information about her real employers. I was hired by the Galactic Trade Consortium, Zexlia insisted. I have documentation. I'm sure you do, Jake said as he examined one of her data devices. But I'm betting that documentation won't hold up under close examination. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this job look legitimate, but they made mistakes. Jake connected Zexlia's communication device to his own computer system. It took several minutes to break through the security, but Jake had learned some useful skills during his military service. When he finally accessed the device's memory, what he found confirmed his suspicions. The job offer had come through intermediaries. With payments routed through multiple anonymous accounts, the documentation looked official, but the digital signatures were forged. Jake Morrison sat across from Zexlia in the mining station's small conference room. The Vorthok hunter was no longer trapped in the containment field, but electromagnetic restraints around her wrists prevented her from using her natural abilities or accessing her equipment. Jake had disabled her camouflage systems and weapon interfaces, leaving her as helpless as any ordinary prisoner. I have been thinking about what you showed me, Zexlia said, her musical voice quieter than before. The evidence suggests that my employment contract was indeed falsified. Jake nodded as he reviewed the data they had extracted from her communication devices. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this job look legitimate. They knew enough about Vorthok culture to approach you through the right channels, and they had enough resources to create convincing fake documentation. This troubles me greatly, Zexlia admitted. My reputation depends on only accepting legitimate contracts. If word spreads that I was deceived by false employers, other Vorthok will question my judgment. Jake looked up from the datapad he was studying. Your reputation is the least of our problems right now. Someone powerful enough to fool a professional. Hunter is also powerful enough to cause serious trouble for both of us. Over the past 2 hours, Jake and Zexlia had been piecing together the truth behind her mission. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. The fake contract had been created by someone with access to high-level government databases and advanced forgery technology. The payments had been routed through accounts connected to several major criminal organizations. Have been hunting you for 3 months, Zexlia said. During that time, I learned much about your habits and capabilities. You're more resourceful than I initially believed. Thanks, I think, Jake replied. But I've been learning about you too. I know you've been watching me since before I even realized I was being hunted. Zexlia's reptilian features showed what might have been embarrassment. It is true. Go. I observed you for 6 weeks before beginning active pursuit. It is standard procedure to study prey before moving to capture. Jake leaned back in his chair. That's what I don't understand. Why would someone hire a hunter of your reputation to capture a simple cargo hauler? Even if I had stolen navigation data, that's not the kind of crime that usually requires a Vorthok hunter. I wondered about this myself, Zexlia admitted. But the payment was substantial, and the contract seemed legitimate. I assumed the employers had reasons they did not share with me. Jake pulled up a star chart on the room's display screen. Look at this. These are all the places I've been in the past 6 months. Now look at these shipping records I pulled from the station's database. Notice anything interesting? Zexlia studied the information carefully. Her alien eyes could process visual data much faster than human eyes, and she quickly spotted the pattern Jake was pointing out. Your routes have taken you near several locations where valuable cargo shipments have disappeared, she observed. But the timing does not match. You were not present when the thefts occurred. Exactly, Jake said. But someone who knew my routes could have used that knowledge to plan those thefts. They could rob a cargo shipment and then make it look like I was in the area when it happened. You believe someone has been using your travel patterns to provide cover for their criminal activities. Jake nodded. And when they were done with me, they hired you to eliminate the evidence. If a legendary Vorthok hunter captured or killed Jake Morrison for stealing navigation data, no one would investigate further. Zexlia was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. This would explain why the contract specified that you be brought back alive. Questioned, but living prey can be made to confess to crimes they did not commit. And if I died while resisting capture, well, that would just be an unfortunate accident, Jake added grimly. Jake's computer chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as station security, but Jake was immediately suspicious. Edge barely had any security force. They certainly wouldn't be sending him official communications. Jake opened the message carefully. Using security protocols to scan for hidden programs or tracking codes, the message appeared to be from the station commander, ordering Jake to report to the security office immediately for questioning about unauthorized modifications to station systems. Someone knows we're here, Jake said, showing the message too. Zexlia. And they know I've been messing with the station's equipment. Zexlia examined the message with her enhanced senses. This communication contains subtle markers that indicate it was composed using Sindarin translation software. The Sindarin are a species known for their involvement in organized crime. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Sindarin Syndicate was one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the galaxy. If they were behind this conspiracy, then Jake and Zexlia were in much more danger than he had realized. We need to get off this station, Jake said, standing up quickly. If the Sindarin know we're here, they'll send a strike team to clean up loose ends. I agree, Zexlia said. But first, I must ask something of you. Will you release these restraints? I give you my word as a hunter that I will not attempt to capture you. Jake hesitated. Trusting an alien predator went against every survival instinct he had. But Zexlia had been cooperating with his investigation, and he would need her help. To escape whatever was coming? Your word as a hunter? Jake asked. Among my people, such a promise is sacred. To break it would mean permanent exile and the loss of all honor. Jake made his decision and deactivated the electromagnetic restraints. Zexlia flexed her hands and immediately began checking her equipment, which Jake had returned to her. "Thank you," she said simply. "Now, what is your plan for leaving this station?" Jake was already moving toward the door. "First, we get to my ship, then we get as far away from here as possible and figure out our next move." They made their way quickly through the station's corridors. Jake noticed that the usual sounds of mining operations had stopped, and many of the workers seemed to have disappeared. The few people they encountered avoided eye contact and hurried away when they saw Jake and Zexlia approaching. "The station is too quiet," Zexlia observed. "Something has frightened the workers." They reached the docking bay where Jake's ship was berthed. The Star Runner looked exactly as Jake had left it, but his enhanced paranoia made him suspicious. Of anything that seemed too normal, Jake activated his ship's external sensors and ran a quick scan of the docking bay. The results made his blood run cold. There were 3 ships docked at the station that hadn't been there an hour earlier, and all 3 were broadcasting Sindarin identification codes. "We have company," Jake said, showing Zexlia the sensor readings. "This looks like a full strike team. How many?" Zexlia asked, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapons. "At least 12, maybe more. These are serious professionals, not the kind of thugs who usually work for criminal syndicates." Jake began running through options in his mind. Star Runner was fast, but not fast enough to outrun military-grade pursuit ships. The docking bay's exit was probably being watched, and any attempt to launch would result in immediate attack. "I have an idea," Jake said suddenly. "But it's going to require perfect timing and a lot of luck." Jake began activating systems throughout the mining station, using the modifications he had made over the past week. He had originally designed these changes to trap Zexlia, but they could serve a different purpose now. "What are you doing?" Zexlia asked. "I'm turning this entire station into a weapon," Jake replied, his fingers flying over the control interface. "Mining stations use controlled explosions to break up asteroids. With the right adjustments, I can redirect that explosive power toward more immediate targets." Jake's plan was desperate and dangerous, but it was their only chance. He activated the station's mining charges and redirected their targeting systems toward the docked Sindarin ships. At the same time, he began overloading the station's power grid to create additional chaos. "This will destroy the station," Zexlia pointed out. "Better than letting the Sindarin kill everyone here to cover their tracks," Jake replied. "I'm sending an evacuation signal to all station personnel. They'll have about 10 minutes to reach the emergency shelters." Jake's computer screen lit up with warnings as the station's systems began to overload. Emergency alarms echoed through. The corridors and automated announcements urged all personnel to evacuate immediately. "Time to go," Jake said, leading Zexlia toward his ship. "Once those mining charges detonate, we'll have about 30 seconds to launch before the whole station comes apart." They ran through the docking bay as explosions began echoing from other parts of the station. Jake could see figures in combat armor moving through the corridors. Clearly the Sindarin strike team that had come to eliminate them. Jake and Zexlia reached the Star Runner just as the first mining charges detonated. The station shook violently, and pieces of debris began falling from the ceiling. Jake sealed the airlock and ran toward the bridge, while Zexlia strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. "I have never seen a human fight like this," Zexlia said. As Jake started the ship's engines, "Your species is more dangerous than mine believed." The Star Runner drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, its engines powered down to avoid detection. Jake Morrison and Zexlia had been hiding for 3 days, using the time to analyze the data they had recovered and plan their next move. The small ship's bridge felt cramped with both a human and a Vorthok working side by side, but they had found an effective rhythm. "I have finished decoding the Sindarin communication logs," Zexlia announced, looking up from her portable computer. "The information confirms our suspicions, but it also reveals something much worse." Jake stopped working on his own analysis and turned to face her. "How much worse?" "The Sindarin have been planning this operation for over 2 years. You were not their only target. They have been systematically eliminating independent cargo haulers throughout this sector of the galaxy. Jake felt his stomach drop. How many? At least 30 ships have disappeared in the past 18 months. The Sindarin made each disappearance look like an accident or piracy attack. They needed the cargo routes controlled by specific individuals. So they removed those individuals and took over their businesses. And they hired hunters like you to eliminate anyone who might discover the pattern, Jake concluded. Zexlia nodded grimly. My contract was part of a larger plan. There are at least 6 other Vorthok hunters who have been given similar assignments. All of them believe they are working for legitimate employers. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. So we're not just dealing with one criminal conspiracy. This is a full-scale takeover of the independent shipping industry. Appears so. The Sindarin have been very careful to cover their tracks. Without the evidence we recovered from the mining station, no one would have connected these seemingly random incidents. Jake pulled up a star chart showing the locations where cargo haulers had disappeared. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. The Sindarin had been targeting key shipping routes that connected frontier colonies with the main trade networks. They're trying to create a monopoly, Jake realized. If they control enough cargo routes, they can dictate prices and shipping schedules throughout this entire region. And anyone who tries to compete with them simply disappears, Zexlia added. 8. It is an effective strategy, if completely without honor. Jake's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Lisa Grant, his friend and occasional co-pilot. Jake hesitated before opening the message, worried that it might be another trap. Jake, where are you? Lisa's voice sounded stressed and frightened. There are people looking for you. They came to my ship asking questions, and they didn't seem like the friendly type. I'm heading for the Centauri trade station. If you get this message, meet me there. And Jake, be careful. These people are serious. Jake's hands clenched in two fists. The Sindarin were now threatening his friends to get to him. This had gone far beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. We need to help her, Jake said. If the Sindarin think Lisa knows something, they'll kill her to be safe. I understand your concern for your friend, Zexlia said carefully. But traveling to a major trade station would be extremely dangerous. The Sindarin will be expecting. You two try to rescue her? Then we don't give them what they expect, Jake replied, his mind already working on a plan. We're going to do something they won't see coming. Jake spent the next hour explaining his idea to Zexlia. It was risky and complicated, but it had the advantage of being completely unexpected. Instead of trying to rescue Lisa quietly, they were going to expose the entire Sindarin conspiracy in the most public way possible. You want to broadcast our evidence to every news organization in the galaxy? Zexlia asked, making sure she understood the plan. Not just news organizations. Trade guilds, shipping companies, government agencies, and anyone else who might be affected by this conspiracy. Once the information is public, the Sindarin won't be able to silence us by killing a few people. This plan has merit, Zexlia? Agreed, but it will also make us permanent enemies of one of the galaxy's most powerful criminal organizations. They already want us dead, Jake pointed out. At least this way, we take them down with us. They set course for the Centauri trade station, but instead of approaching directly, Jake plotted a course that would take them through 3 different systems. At each stop, they would upload their evidence to local communication networks and send copies to major news organizations. The first stop was a busy shipping hub called Port Freedom. Jake and Zexlia worked together to hack into the station's communication array and broadcast their evidence to every ship in the system. Within hours, the story was spreading across the galactic information networks. The Sindarin will be in chaos, Zexlia observed, as they prepared to leave Port Freedom. They built their entire operation on secrecy. Public exposure will force them to abandon many of their plans. Good, Jake said grimly. But they'll also be desperate to stop us before we can do more damage. Their second stop was a government facility where Jake had military contacts from his service days. Commander Sarah Blake, his former commanding officer, agreed to meet with them and review their evidence. This is incredible, Jake, Commander Blake said after studying their data. The Sindarin have been operating right under our noses for years. We'll launch a full investigation immediately. What about the other cargo haulers who are still in danger? Jake asked. There are Vorthok hunters out there who still think they're working legitimate jobs. We'll send warnings to all known Vorthok hunting companies, Commander Blake promised, and we'll issue alerts to independent shipping companies throughout the sector. By the time Jake and Zexlia reached the Centauri trade station, their story was front-page news across half the galaxy. The Sindarin conspiracy was unraveling as investigators from dozens of different agencies began coordinating their efforts. Jake found Lisa in the station's main cantina, surrounded by security guards that Commander Blake had sent to protect her. She looked tired and scared but unharmed. Jake, Lisa jumped up and hugged him tightly. I was so worried about you. What's this I'm hearing on the news about criminal conspiracies and alien hunters? It's a long story, Jake said, returning the hug. But the important thing is that you're safe. Lisa stepped back and looked at Zexlia with curiosity rather than fear. So you're the famous alien hunter I've been hearing about? You don't look as scary as the news reports made you sound. I am pleased to meet a friend of Jake Morrison, Zexlia replied with what might have been a smile. Your friend is more resourceful than most of my previous former prey, Jake corrected. We're partners now. Over the next few hours, Jake, Lisa, and Zexlia watched as news reports detailed the collapse of the Sindarin shipping conspiracy. Government forces had raided Sindarin facilities in 12 different systems, arresting hundreds of criminals and recovering evidence of dozens of additional crimes. The Vorthok hunting companies are demanding compensation for the false contracts, Zexlia reported, reading updates on her communication device. Several Sindarin leaders have been charged with fraud and murder. What about the other cargo? Haulers, Lisa asked. The ones who were targeted? Most of them are safe, Jake said, checking his own reports. The government warnings reached them in time. Few had close calls, but no one else was killed. As the excitement died down, Jake found himself facing an uncertain future. His cargo hauling business was safe, but the experience had changed. He had learned things about the galaxy that he couldn't ignore. What will you do now? Zexlia asked him as they prepared to part ways. Keep hauling cargo, I guess, Jake replied. But I'll be more careful about who I trust and where I go, and you. Jake asked Zexlia. What does a Vorthok hunter do when her reputation has been damaged by false contracts? I will return to my homeworld and report what happened, Zexlia said. The Council of Hunters will want to establish new procedures to prevent such deception in the future. Your tactics have given us much to consider. My tactics? You showed me that prey can become predator through preparation and unconventional thinking. This is a lesson that will change how my people approach hunting. Jake extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Zexlia shook it. The gesture felt strange, given that they had been enemies just days earlier. If you ever need help with anything, Jake said, you know how to find me? And if you ever need a hunter for legitimate purposes, Zexlia replied, you have earned the right to call upon me. They parted ways at the station's main docking bay. Jake watched Zexlia's sleek ship disappear into the starfield, then turned back to his own vessel. Lisa was waiting for him with a smile. So, she said, ready for a nice, boring cargo run? Laughed for the first time in months. After everything that's happened, boring sounds perfect. As the Star Runner left Centauri Station and headed for the Outer Rim, Jake reflected on what he had learned. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of threats that could come from anywhere, but it was also full of unexpected allies and possibilities. He had started this adventure as prey, being hunted by a legendary predator. He was ending it as someone who had helped expose a major criminal conspiracy and formed an unlikely friendship with an alien warrior.